And we're back. Notre Dame Nation, IB Nation, welcome back to the Irish Breakdown podcast. It is Tuesday, June 28th. And Ryan, this is kind of that summer period of time where recruiting is supposed to slow down and we're supposed to be able to go on vacations. I still don't know what that is, but I've been told I need to go on one. My wife has even told me I need to go on one. I kind of forgot what those are. But unfortunately, I say jokingly, Notre Dame did not get the memo about this being a slower recruiting period. And so over the next week, 5 big Notre Dame targets are going to be making their college decisions, including 1 in the 24 class and then 4 in the 2023 class. So we thought it'd be a good time to sort of preview that. Tomorrow, we're going to have a team-related podcast, and then tomorrow night at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern, we will be live for Cam Williams' decision. So we'll carry that and then talk about what it means for Notre Dame. We hope to have somebody there at that in person. Thursday, Charles Jaggasol is going to announce his decision in the morning. It will not be live. It will just be a social media thing he's going to put out. There's a chance we may move our start time for the show. So Thursday's normal show will just be about his decision and what that means for Notre Dame. So we won't have 2 shows on Thursday since he will be doing his early in the morning. And then Friday we'll have 2 shows as well. So we'll have our mailbag show and at 1 o'clock, like our normal time. And then at 6 p.m. Eastern, we will go live to talk about the decision that Micah Bell, the cornerback from Texas, is about to make. Sunday is Rico Flores' chance to make his decision known. It's down to, we'll talk about who it's down to. We'll carry that live, Ryan. I don't remember off the top of my head what time his decision is, but that's why you need to hit that like, subscribe button and that notification bell. So we'll put it out there, but we'll also tweet it out and all those type of things and have it on our message board as far as what time that will begin. We will be live for that. And then, of course, Monday on July 4th, it's Christian Gray's rounds things out. Those are the ones we know of for now. There's a chance that, a kid or 2 could also decide to make a decision over the next week, but we don't have anything scheduled right now. And that's not a hint that something is pending. It's just saying, we didn't know that Charles Jaggasol was going to announce tomorrow until he told Sean Davis yesterday. So I'm simply saying, leaving open the possibility that there may be another 1 or 2 from now until July 4th. But right now, we don't have any of those pending. So what we're going to do today, Ryan, is we're going to preview all 5 of those coming decisions. Instead of having a show each day about, okay, tonight this was going to happen and our show is about that. We're just going to do that now. And then we also thought it'd be kind of fun to, as we kind of go into the month of July, to have sort of a final look at the confidence level for where we are with Notre Dame prospects kind of going into July. And we've done one recently, and now we've been able to gather more data. All the visits are wrapped up now, so that's now a thing of the past. And so we've got a lot more data points and intel on where things stand. So we're going to give you a final look at our confidence level for Notre Dame targets. But we are going to begin, Ryan, with a look at the upcoming decisions. And we're just going to kind of go in order. Obviously, we'll just go chronological order with these. And the first decision is going to be tomorrow night, and that's going to be from 2024 wide receiver Cam Williams. It's interesting. These Notre Dame's kind of in a little bit of a battle with Ohio State in the 2023 class for number 1. They keep kind of leapfrogging each other. So a lot of success over the next week for Notre Dame. The 23 class is going to certainly help them sort of solidify being back in the number 1 spot. For 24, it's about they're already number 1. It's about solidifying that number 1 spot, and that begins with Cam Williams, who is from Glenbard South, right? I believe is where he goes to high school in Glen Ellen, Illinois. And, this is a kid that, honestly, Ryan, a month ago, I would have said I think Notre Dame's in a good place with Cam Williams, but there's other contenders, but I don't think his recruitment's going to be ending anytime soon. That would have been my story to you a month ago.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's escalated certainly quickly, right? If you caught our live show when Jack Larson committed, we talked about it. I think it's kind of the similar layers, right? It's like Cam Williams really liked Notre Dame. Notre Dame was trending in the right direction. And then I think the CJ Carr layer of this impact from the Irish invasion really kind of pushed Jack Larson over the top. And it appears that it may have done something similar to Cam Williams. Now, they're in obviously a competition to see if Cam Williams does follow a similar path and commit to Notre Dame tomorrow night. But the truth of the matter is that he has a very good relationship with CJ Carr. They've had great talks both at the Irish Invasion and outside of the Irish Invasion. And we're at a point now where Notre Dame is the clear leader entering the decision tomorrow night. And we're talking about a kid that, I mean, yesterday on the show, I think we both agreed top 100 to 125 caliber type of player, right? Like somewhere in that ballpark. Cam Williams at 6'2", 185 pounds out of the state of Illinois, is a really talented pass catcher. And it seems like Notre Dame is potentially going to get off to a really good start on the wide receiver board for the 2024 cycle.
It's amazing what happens when a big-time quarterback commits in that class. Now, I think a big-time quarterback can impact all classes, but it is. I mean, we talked about this yesterday. Like, I think sometimes there's too much of a focus on only the quarterback for that class, and there's more to it than that. But there's no question that having a quarterback in that class helps, especially when it comes to kids who are close. And again, I don't think if CJ Carr is not committed to Notre Dame right now, I don't know if Cam Williams feels any need to wind his recruitment down. That's just the reality of the situation at this point in time. And for a long time, a lot of people felt like Michigan was the team to beat. And let's be honest, up until Marcus Freeman got hired as the defensive coordinator, now the head coach, Michigan was beating Notre Dame for a lot of kids in Chicago area, right? And so they beat them for a kid on offense last year, although I think it ended up working out. I wasn't a huge Tyler Morris fan as a player, but especially after the knee injury, but still they wanted him and they lost. They lost him to Michigan. So if Notre Dame's able to pull this off, and we feel good about it, right? Like, I mean, look, we're not taking the kid's moment, right? If you're on Twitter and you see the conversations between CJ and Carr and Cam Williams, they're not exactly hiding what the decision is going to be, right? We're not going to say it, but I'm comfortable saying that we're very confident with where things stand going into this decision.
You're all smart people, so if you want to go look at Twitter, what's happening there, I think you can paint this piece together.
Don't want to be insulting to that. So look, I don't think Jack Larson is in the class if CJ Williams doesn't commit or CJ Carr doesn't commit, and I don't think Cam Williams is in a decision making process if he doesn't if CJ Carr is not in the class. Now we'll see if that can have an impact in the 2023 class. Right. And Archer, our resident Ohio State fan, is referring to the impact that Dylan Raiola is having on the 2023 receiver class for Ohio State. He's the number one quarterback in the 2024 class. I think CJ Carr is the number two quarterback in the 2024 class. And so we'll also find out if it can start to impact the 23 class a little bit. And I think that it will, but we'll dive into that a little bit. But I do think Cam Williams is important, Ryan. You had an article out today at Irish Breakdown that I would encourage everybody to go read. I'd made a comment a couple months ago that before we really kind of knew what exactly the 2024 class was made of, about how unique it is that sort of the North and the Northeast is such a strong year that Notre Dame has been able to take advantage of that. You've got Drake Bowen's a top 100 player in your home state. You were able to get Brandon Vernon out of Ohio, who's a top 100 player. You go to Massachusetts and you're able to get a 4-star kid like Preston Zinter, who's a top 250 kid by Rivals. You just kind of go through, you get look above the Mason-Dixon line that, then there's kids like Devin Houston's who's right below it. You've been able to kind of have a lot of success in that class with kids that are from more pro Notre Dame areas. That it's not often the case that Notre Dame's able to have success from kids that are in pro Notre Dame areas. Like I said, like Indiana with Drake Bowen. They've got two kids from I forgot about Boubacar Traore, who's a top 100 recruit from the state of Massachusetts. Those kind of kids just don't come along every day. And Notre Dame's been able to have some success. Don Schuler's a top 150 caliber kid from the state of New Jersey, which is usually a pro Notre Dame area when they actually hit it. And so that's been a benefit. But the 2024 class might actually even be more loaded in the North than the 2023 class. When you take the true North, right? So we're just going to go like from the Northeast all the way over to like Illinois and And, so not like Northeast or Midwest, but just like the North, right? Which would also include Missouri, which I consider a sort of a backyard state of Notre Dame, which for me is defined as a state that borders Notre Dame or a state that borders a state that Notre Dame. I mean, that should be considered your backyard. And like Clemson has done that. Clemson has basically built their roster for years based on states that are border them or are connected to them. So like Florida would be a state that's not bordering on South Carolina, but it borders a state that borders South Carolina. You need to be able to stretch out your base like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what Notre Dame has been able to do. And 24 is loaded. And obviously you've already got two, really three actually, in when Owen Wafel, because we're expanding it to just the true North. So not just the home base, but you've got CJ Carr from Michigan, Brandon Davis Swain from Michigan, both top 30 recruits according to Rivals. You've got Owen Wafel, who's a 4-star kid. So those are three Northern kids that you've got in the class already. And then, of course, you added Jack Larson from North Carolina. Cam Williams is another one of those. And it's important to get those kids, Ryan, because the last big recruiting weekend that Notre Dame had, who were two of the kids that came on campus? Brandon Davis Swain and CJ Carr. Yep. If Cam Williams were to pick Notre Dame, you don't think Cam Williams is going to be a lot of Notre Dame home games this year when there's recruits on campus? You know what I mean? And so when you can land big-time players, highly ranked players, well-known players from your backyard, it really does help your recruiting operation. And of course, the CJ Carr impact is big, but there's also an impact for getting a kid like Cam Williams, in my opinion.
No, I agree completely. And in regards to that piece, real quick, like I even just focused just on the Midwest. Like I didn't even stray over to the Northeast or down into the
we did the home base thing. Right.
Exactly.
Right. So it's like Ohio over to Missouri and Michigan and Illinois and then Wisconsin. That was basically it. I mean,
and honestly, the reason for that is because even when you stretch into like Pennsylvania, you're talking about guys like Peter Jones and Emilio Agar, and then you talked about the true Northeast where where Notre Dame is looking at a guy like Gerby Lambert out of the state of Massachusetts. And then you go down into Jack Larson just committed out of the state of North Carolina. And there's sure to be Owen Wafel, like you said, is a New Jersey kid. And there's
on New Jersey, the state that you're in, Ryan, a lot of times Notre Dame has success with D linemen, linebackers, offensive linemen from the North. Sure. But what Jersey has, for example, and this is the thing that I think makes this a little bit different, is it's the skill that we're finding in the North. Emilio Agar is from Pennsylvania. He's a top 100 caliber player. Yep. Don Schuler's teammate, whose name I sadly don't know how to pronounce. I know you've
Toure. I don't know how to pronounce his first name, but Toure. Yep.
So he's a top 200 guy. I think Kaj Sanders is not ranked high, but he will be. If you've seen that kid's film, he's going to be a top 150 player. And then I think that's kind of the difference here a little bit. A kid like Corey, I would argue the most dynamic back on Notre Dame's board is Corey Smith. I keep wanting to say Corey Davis. I'm still having that problem. Dang it, Corey Davis from Western Michigan. But Corey Smith is arguably the most dynamic back on Notre Dame's board. He's from Wisconsin. When does Notre Dame have a dynamic athlete that it is in the game from Wisconsin? How often does Notre Dame produce top 100 players like Cam Williams from the Chicago area who also have really good grades? It doesn't happen often. And so it's important that Notre Dame have success. But this is also something we have to be able to point to and say, this is helping Notre Dame that this now 23 and now 24 are unusually good years in the North, but even more so with skill players. I mean, the Jaggasols we see all the time. I mean, look at the 2017 offensive line, right? You had Alex Bars was from Tennessee. That was like the most Southern kid that they had. Robert Hainsey was from Pennsylvania. Liam Eichenberg's from Ohio. Tommy Kramer's from Ohio. Quentin Nelson's from New Jersey. And so Bars, we had the Sam Mustapher's from the Maryland, D.C. area.
And did you mention McGlinchey? He's a Pennsylvania kid.
Well, he wasn't on the 17 offensive line.
Oh, gotcha.
But he was, though, actually. You're correct. I said Eichenberg, but it was McGlinchey was the left tackle on that team. He was from Pennsylvania. So, yes, your point absolutely stands. And then if you look at the 2020 line, Jarrett Patterson from California and Aaron Banks from California. It's a little bit unique. But, again, Eichenberg from Ohio, Hainsey from Pennsylvania, Kramer from Ohio. That's normal. All the stud defensive linemen Notre Dame's had recently, a lot of them are from the state of Michigan, right? So the big guys they've been able to have success with, it's the skill that they've had to travel all over the country to get, and they're still doing so. But when you can tap into a 5-star quarterback from the state of Michigan, and you can tap into a top 100 receiver from the state of Illinois, and a top 150 DB from Jersey, or a top 100 corner from Pennsylvania, who we're not sure they're going to get all those guys. We're just saying, the higher success rate is got to be key. And that's why getting a kid like Cam Williams in that 2024 class this early helps, because it helps you to build momentum. And as these other kids visit campus, then all of a sudden CJ Carr shows up, Cam Williams shows up, Brandon Davis-Swain shows up, and it's only going to help Notre Dame's recruiting efforts moving forward.
Agree completely. I think that Notre Dame is, again, you're talking about the quality of athlete in the Northeast, just quantify everything as the North in 2023. I think 2024 is another example that this talent gap between the Southern states and the Northern states it's getting less. Like, I mean, obviously the state of Florida, Texas, like those guys, they're always going to produce talent because that's the pipelines, right? But the North is going to be very good for Notre Dame for the next 2 cycles, including 2023. So, and Cam Williams is a great example of that, because an Illinois kid, this high caliber, this high academic of a kid,
skill player.
You have to get that kid. You have
skill
to get that
player.
kid. Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Speaking of highly ranked players from Illinois, that's who is next on the list, and that is Charles Jaggasol. So now we get into the 2023 stretch of recruits, Ryan. Charles Jaggasol is a player who has got a very interesting rankings profile, and it's very much another example of just how wacky this whole recruiting rankings thing has turned into. So Charles Jaggasol is a young man that is ranked as the number 122 player by Rivals. Look, Charles Jaggasol has a lot to work on in his game. He's very raw, but there are not 121 players in the country better than Charles Jaggasol.
Agree.
ESPN ranks him 71st. 247 ranks him 64th. I'm comfortable with that because of how raw he is, because we do differentiate between upside, floor, and ceiling. Ceiling grade is incredibly high. He's one of the 5 most just gifted linemen in this class, in my opinion, along with Monroe Freeling and Samson Okunlola, Caden Proctor, some guys like that. And then on 3 ranks him as the number 7 player in the country and the number 1 offensive lineman. Now, that's a little high unless you're looking at the upside, and then I can live with it as an upside. I still say that's probably a tad high, but, upside-wise, he's got a top 25 national upside, in my opinion.
Sure.
But, 7 to 64, that's a range that I can definitely live with. The point being, when you're complaining about him being number 122 is the one you're pointing out, is like, that's absurd. That's a pretty good football player. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this is a top 100 kid. He is obviously number 41 overall on the On3 rankings. As far as their consensus rankings, he's number 55 overall in the 247 composite rankings. This is a big one. And this is the kind of kid that Notre Dame has had success with in the past. However, this is a big one for Notre Dame, because this is kind of Coach Easton trying to put the finishing touches on a line that people are going to say, yeah, the guy hasn't lost his touch, right? And we've said there's 2 big guys out there. They'd like to get both of them, but Jaggasol is a guy that Harry Easton jumped on immediately when he got hired. And for all the talk of Michigan this and Arkansas, and Arkansas did a great job recruiting him. Michigan did a great job recruiting him. Iowa did a great job recruiting him. Those staffs worked hard. This was never a question for us in regards to where he's going to go. So now we just need to find out for sure what that decision is. But if he does pick Notre Dame, and we feel good about that being the case, again, not one that's a big mystery, this is a big one for Notre Dame. And forget the recruiting rankings for a second. This is a big-time football player that they had to get, because you can't, like, as you said, Ryan, you cannot miss on impact players in your backyard. And that means if it's a kid from, like, Michigan and Ohio is different because there's big-time programs in those states. You're going to miss on a lot of those kids. When there's a kid from Illinois that's a big-time player, I don't care what part of Illinois he's from, if he has any kind of academic profile at all and goes to a Catholic school, you cannot miss. And Notre Dame has done a great job with this one to make sure that they don't.
Did you see my comment on Charles Jaggasol on the board last night, Brian?
Which one?
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. There's a bunch out there right now. No, someone said something about crystal balls or flying high.
Oh, I did see that. Yeah.
I'm like, yeah.
Just so y'all know, Ryan got fired for about 5 minutes last night, and then
it's like the IB crystal ball has been with Charles Jaggasol since January. If we're being honest.
Yeah.
Look, I'm honestly, and this is completely transparent, I am surprised that he has been on the board this long, to be honest, because we know from everything we've heard and from what Sean's talked to him and all that good stuff, Charles doesn't really like the recruiting process.
Right.
Like, it's not his thing, right?
Right.
Like, it was more at this point, my mom needs to be comfortable with the decision, right?
Right.
We need a structured, full scope understanding of what each school is going to give to us. We're going to sit down and we're going to make a proper decision. He did it the right way, in my opinion. And even with the post that he's going to make, right? Like, he doesn't want to go on CBS Sports or do any of that stuff. He's like, I'm going to throw out a social media post and that's it. Like, he's not that type of dude. And I respect that so much.
And then he's heading to a workout. That's
exactly
the funny thing, right? Then he's heading to a workout after that. Sean has been all over this one, and this is the reason where a lot of our confidence level comes from, is because of how just locked in Sean has been on this one with getting to know the coach and the mom, and Charles is very open about why he prolonged the recruiting process. We thought this one, to be honest with you, for full disclosure, we thought this was going to be over in April after he visited. Like, that's what we were anticipating. That's kind of some of the intel that we had. But then when his mom sat down, he wanted to make sure that mom was on board. And what mom being on board, as we found out, wasn't seeing campus because she's seen it before. And Sean had wrote about that. It was, she wanted to be able to look Marcus Freeman in the eye. She wanted to look Harry Heastan in the eye and be like, what's your plan to take care of my son? Which is what every parent should be asking. And not so much like just about football, but in all areas. And it was funny, Marcus Freeman kind of nailed the other stuff, but the best part of Sean's interview with them after the visit was how mom was in the film room with Harry Heastan asking questions and talking ball. Like, she said this was about football. And I'm like, you don't see mom saying that a whole lot. It was awesome.
That is awesome.
But that was the big part of it. And once that got done, that was the key. And so, but Charles is always honest and upfront about that. I'm not going to decide until my mom's on board, and my mom's not going to be on board until she gets a chance to sit down and see eye to eye with these, face to face with these men that are going to be basically in charge of her son's direction and guidance over the next 4 or 5 years. And I'm like, you know what? That's called good parenting.
100%, you know what I mean? I respect everything out of the Jaggasol perspective on the recruiting. Like, again, we thought this was going to end a lot earlier, but they didn't jump the gun. They made this a family decision, his coach included in this conversation, right? Like, this was a very thorough and thought out process. This wasn't straying it along because you love the recruiting process. This was straying it along because you wanted to make the best decision. I applaud the Jaggasols for how they attacked this process.
Mm-hmm. And as I said, Sean has done a tremendous job. Sean Davis has done a tremendous job covering this recruitment, which is why we've been out in front of all this. Sean broke yesterday that he was going to make his decision on Thursday, and it's been a big one. So this is going to be, if Notre Dame can close it, which we anticipate they're going to do, this is going to be a big feather in Harry Heastan's cap, because of all the and they've landed some really good offensive linemen. He's the highest ranked. And to me, I'd argue he has the highest ceiling. I think him and Elijah Page, of the 5 that would be in the class if they land him, to me are the 2 with the highest ceiling for me, right? And I'm not sure if you agree with that, but that he is my number one upside guy of the guys that would be in the class.
Yeah, me. I don't disagree with that at all.
So that'll be tomorrow morning or Thursday morning, and we'll have a show kind of breaking it all down that afternoon. We may go live at 2. Because if we go live at 2, there's a chance that Charles he's going to try to find some time. There's a chance he may join the show depending on what his decision is. But if he was going to join, it would have to be in like that 2 to 3 window. And if we go live at 1, I'm not sure if we can guarantee that we'll be there. We may still go live at 1. That's why you need to hit that notification bell. I just need to go over, talk to Vince and Ryan and just kind of see what our schedule is going to be like. Because what I don't want to do is do a 1 o'clock show where we spend an hour and a half talking about Charles, and then he joins the show if that were to be the case. And it's like, oh, by the way, here's Charles Jaggasol talking about his commitment. That would be weird. But I also, I also don't want to, I think, did I just say, I don't want to do a show talking about something else? I also don't want to do another show for an hour and a half talking about Charles and his commitment and all that. And then if that's what he does, and then we get him on like an hour and a half into it. So we may end up doing that. It just depends on kind of talking with Ryan and Vince about what our schedule is going to be that week. So, but 1 or 2 o'clock, we're going to go live during one of those 2 windows to discuss his decision, and that will be our show that day. Now, if he doesn't pick Notre Dame, then that would be a little something different. We'll still talk about it, but it may be part of a bigger show, a different kind of show. But as we said, we feel comfortable that Notre Dame is on that one. So next on the list, Ryan. So that's Thursday. We got Cam Williams on Wednesday, Charles Jaggasol on Thursday. I'm hoping that by Friday evening at 6 o'clock Eastern, when Micah Bell goes live with his decision, that I'll still have a voice, because we'll have those shows plus a mailbag on Friday. And this is a big one too, Ryan. And obviously he's got a list of a top 10. It's Notre Dame. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head: Notre Dame, Texas, Tennessee, Baylor, Michigan State, Duke, Stanford, Vanderbilt, Harvard, and then there's one other that I'm missing. Unless I didn't listen. I didn't listen to Notre Dame. I said I didn't listen to Notre Dame.
Yep.
So I'm like, I got 9. Who's the 10th? Oh, that's right, the team I cover. And then Notre Dame, and it's a very unique list, because you've got like Texas, Tennessee, Michigan State, Baylor on one side. Not that some of those aren't good academic schools, but It's like they're not known as academic schools. And then on the other side, you've got like Notre Dame, Duke. Oh, Stanford. Stanford's the other one. It's Notre Dame, Duke, Stanford, Vanderbilt, and Harvard. And you're like, and the Notre Dame, you're like, okay, yeah, this kid's a little different. And honestly, we didn't know what his decision was going to be when he announced in early June his top 10 and commitment day on the same day. But then as soon as you look at your list, you're like, yeah, okay, I feel good about that one. Right? Because how many top 100 corners from the state of Texas have top 10s that include Stanford, Notre Dame, Vanderbilt, Duke, and Harvard?
With 10-3 speed as well.
Right.
Got to throw that in there.
Right. So you don't see that often. Speaking of Micah Bell, Ryan, he is from Houston, Texas. Notre Dame hasn't landed a lot of kids from the Houston area the last 20 years. So that's a big one. 247 Sports ranks him as the number 55 player in the country. Rivals ranks him number 114, and ESPN ranks him number 128. And then there's Ole On 3, which ranks him as the number 63 player in Texas. In Texas. He's the 41st best cornerback in the country, according to On 3, which is just an absolutely absurd ranking. But I think the other three are more in line. To me, I view him, I'm comfortable with where 247 Sports has him, just from an upside standpoint. And the fact he is a dynamic running back, Ryan. You've talked about this. Like, you've even said, like, his best film right now from just a production standpoint is at running back. And so, 1,000-yard running back last year, very talented corner. His brother Dylan signed with Georgia last year. So he kind of helped take some of that, he not kind of helped, but he took some of that production, away. Obviously, he was a really good player for them as well, signed with Georgia. And so this is one that's a pretty big deal, in my opinion, Ryan. This is a pretty big deal. His brother Dylan last year rushed for 655 yards and 6.5 yards per carry. I'm actually going to pull up Micah's stats as well, so we can kind of go and compare them. But his brother signed with Georgia last year, national champs. Brother had 46 catches, 662 yards, had 655 receiving yards, really good all-around player. So that kind of helped to put in perspective why his rushing numbers weren't higher. He averaged Micah rushed for 1,118 yards at 8.3 yards per carry and 9 touchdowns. Dylan had 14 touchdowns. So it looks like Dylan was kind of the goal line back. Dylan's a bigger player. Dylan's 200 pounds, was over 200 pounds last year. Micah also did some things in the pass game. Not a ton, but he did catch 10 balls. But then, of course, his defensive film was really, really impressive. And and that's one of those things you look at and say, "Well, this kid's a really good all around player." But his ceiling to me is highest on defense, which is why I like him at corner. But he's going to make his decision Friday night. This is a big one for Notre Dame because quarterback and cornerback are the only two positions right now that Notre Dame doesn't have anybody in the class. Yeah. I mean, they've got at least one player at every other position except cornerback and quarterback. And so Micah Bell gives them a chance to get on the board, but like I said, they got to close it out. Houston's another one on the list. So I'd have to go through the list again. Houston was also a team on the list. So I'd have to go through the list and count those up again. But Houston was a team and that is actually a school he visited recently. So it wasn't just Notre Dame. He also made a trip to Houston, which is easy because it's in the town he lives in.
Backyard.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So Micah Bell, Ryan, what are your thoughts on him? And then what are your thoughts on his recruitment? Because you've had a chance to talk to him a little bit.
Yeah, no, he's a dynamic player. And I think I put on an article last week or the week before where, this kind of string of 6 days with 5 players that Notre Dame is targeting, making decisions. Like, this is where Notre Dame can seriously flip the script as far as what the perception is of cornerback recruiting, at least in the 2023 cycle. And I would argue that Micah has near as much upside as any corner in the 2023 class, because honestly, he's one of those kids that is asked to do so much for his team that he can't really just focus on just playing corner. Like, he's a kid for me, when he gets really good coaching and he's going to focus on one singular thing. I mean, the sky's the limit. 'Cause I think the length is pretty good for a player his size, but then, I mean, again, you can't teach 10-3 speed. Like, it's something you have or something you don't. And he has tremendous upside. And then, Brian, like, the other layer of it is, kid's going to be a dynamic return man for Notre Dame as well. Like, I would not be shocked even if he's not playing a ton of snaps as a true freshman, if he's not the team's main punt returner or he's on the kick return unit, like whatever it is, because the kid just, again, you can't teach that type of speed. So this is potentially a big one for Notre Dame. They, like you said, the minute you saw his final 10, you're kind of like, that's
right.
pretty telling there. And then the other fact that he made one visit to Notre Dame this month and he hasn't been anywhere else. That is another big indicator of, I think Micah Bell likes Notre Dame a little bit. Just a little bit.
Now it's about closing, right? Now it's about closing the deal and making sure, because look, you may think you're going to get a kid, but until he goes and says that, other schools are going to keep trying to recruit him. And that's where Notre Dame is. So even if they feel they're going to get him, they got to keep recruiting him until he makes his decision. And then of course beyond, and so this is a big one for Notre Dame. They've got to get on the board of corner. And then there's a second one that could commit here soon, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we, Ryan, are going chronologically. So you have Micah Bell. That's a big one. That gets you a borderline top 100 kid. And once On3 comes around and gets their minds right about his ranking, he jumps into the top 100. I mean, and they don't even have to rank him that high. They just have to rank him as like a top 300 guy, and that would probably send his composite and consensus into the top 100, because he's borderline there now. Even with, think about this, even with On3 ranking him as a pretty low 3-star, the number 63 player in the state of Texas, their own consensus ranking has him number 118. And then he's number 120 on 247 Sports.
That should be like a moment where you're kind of like, that's weird that our consensus is so much higher than our actual grade. Like, that's weird, right? Like, maybe we should double check this at this point. But
agree. And again, you don't have to come around to him being a top 100 player. I think he is. That's the grade he's earned at Irish Breakdown, is a top 100 to 150 caliber guy. But man, the upside is enormous. And that alone, the speed alone and the production alone should have him ranked a lot higher than the 63rd best kid in the state of Texas. That's just insanity. Up next, Ryan, Sunday. So as of now, Saturday is an off day. That's a day for us to recover and rest. And we'll probably have I'll have a show with Sean Davis most likely on Saturday. We'll be back on track. He had some things going on with family and a wedding and some other things going on Saturday. So he and I think a family birthday. I mean, so we just decided to take the day off, and I needed a day off, to be honest with you. And we were able to kind of get caught up on some things, but we'll be back Saturday. And so that'll be our show Saturday. But as of right now, Ryan, there are no commitments planned for Saturday. And I don't say that as a tease, like, this kid made it. No, as of right now, there just aren't any decisions made. Sunday, however, there is a big one, and that is Rico Flores. He is going to make his decision. Ryan, do you know off the top of your head the time?
I believe it was 4. Could I be wrong there?
4 Eastern?
I'll double check. Yeah, let me double check, though. Let me double check.
So Rico is going to make his decision on Sunday, we know, and his final 3 for a little bit. Notre Dame initially made his top 5. We talked a lot about his recruitment yesterday, so we won't rehash all of it. We'll just kind of quickly give you an idea. They made his top 5 several months ago when he released the top 5, but they were kind of at the bottom of it because he'd never been to Notre Dame, as far as we know. And then they just kind of slowly worked their way up. The staff did a great job. Tommy Reese went out and saw him during the evaluation period. Chancey Stuckey went out and saw him during the evaluation period. And they just kind of slowly worked up. And then he released the top 3. That included Ohio State, Georgia, and Notre Dame. At the time, we felt Notre Dame was closer to 3 than they were to 1. Ohio State was considered the leader for a very long time. Obviously, their receiver class is filled up. But even before their class filled up, Ryan, once he made the visit to Notre Dame on the weekend of June 10th, we felt Notre Dame for the first time actually had a shot at beating Ohio State, even if they were willing to take Rico. Because at that time, Cardinell had not committed, or Did Cardinal commit? No, Cardinal had not committed. Brandon
Hmm.
Ennis had not committed, and Noah Rogers had not committed. And at the time, Bama was really making a run at Brandon Rogers. There was a lot of rumblings, whether they were true or not, about Noah Rogers and NC State. End of the day, the Buckeyes got them all, which opened this up and kind of took out the top contender for Notre Dame. So we feel, and then of course Georgia canceled his visit, which from the people I've talked to, that wasn't a cancellation based on they're full or they don't want them. That was a cancellation based on we know we're not getting them and we're going to kind of save face a little bit. Because
Sure.
at the same time, I know for a fact there's other uncommitted and committed receivers to other places that Georgia's trying to get involved with because they're not doing really well at receiver right now. And so there's some guys that they like, but this was not a we're not taking you or you're not a fit or you're not we don't have room or anything like that. This was more of a we're not getting them. So let's and that's smart recruiting by the way. And so it was going to be a Notre Dame Ohio State battle, and going into it, obviously things are looking really, really good for where Notre Dame stands with Rico Flores. And this is a big one because as a right receiver, they need minimum 4. They only got 1, and Rico's a kid that brings a strong recruiting profile, right? I mean, he ranks between 106 on Rivals and 266 on On3, consensus 4-star kid. He's in the 200s by 247 ESPN and On3. Rivals ranks him number 106. I think he's kind of in between Rivals and 247, which has him number 246. I think he's in between there is where I would rank him. But the 4-star is obvious. We broke his film down yesterday. His kid's really grown on me. He's a good football player and a must get for Notre Dame at this point in time in the 2023 class.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's said perfectly. And the moment that we saw Ohio State fill up, that was my main concern. And I think it was last week we talked about it, or 2 weeks ago. I can't remember. Days kind of blend together, it seems. But we talked about, I said that I wanted to monitor the Ohio State visit because that was the one that worried me. Georgia never really worried me. It was Ohio State. That was the team where I was just like, like, I think he really likes Ohio State. Like, Brian Hartline has a great pedigree and resume, and I think he's very intrigued by that, obviously. And then once we had Tate Ennis and Noah Rogers back to back to back, that trip gets canceled. You're kind of like, oh, okay, that's a good indicator, obviously, right? So it's the simple fact Notre Dame has been on Rico for a long time, and Rico has never had to question if Notre Dame liked him as a player, as an athlete, as a student, all those good things. They've been in the corner for Rico for a very long time, and there's never been any wishy-washiness to, is he a take? How much do we like him? Do we like him, not love him? Like, that conversation has never been a point for Rico Flores with Notre Dame. So again, another one, you feel really good going into it because especially after Ohio State does not seem to have room for him, and that has kind of derailed that recruitment. So
yeah, but again, I don't care how a kid ends up in the class as long as they get him. And I do think that we need to talk. Ohio State was going to be tough to beat, but I do believe Notre Dame had made themselves, and that's just going off of the intel we got from both sides of it. Was the things he was saying to Notre Dame during the visit, to other recruits during the visit, the week after, Notre Dame moved the needle big time there.
Yep.
Would it have been enough if he would have gone to Ohio State? And I don't know. We won't know the answer to that. But I did feel like Notre Dame had finally put themselves in position where they had a shot to really actually close that one out, depending on how some other things happen. So Rico Flores makes his decision on Sunday. Big one. They need a receiver. And then you kind of go into Monday, and this is commitment number 5. Obviously, Christian Gray is going to make his decision. Is his time 4:00 as well? I thought I remember seeing Christian Gray's decision also being.
I think it was 4. Yeah,
4:00.
I'll double check that, but that sounds very familiar. Yep.
So he makes his decision on July 4th, and this is again another big one. And this was been a very interesting recruitment, Ryan, because Notre Dame was considered the early leader for Christian Gray, and you're talking about a kid who's ranked number 51 in the nation by Rivals. The lowest ranking he has is 159 by 247 Sports. I think obviously between those two is exactly where he needs to be. Which way he goes in regards, is he closer to 150 or closer to 50? Just depends on how his speed translates. All the other skills are there. Great feet, great instincts. He's very sticky in coverage. He's long, very smart player, high football IQ, fits at Notre Dame, very religious kid. I mean, just all the boxes get checked for, Notre Dame fit. But He's also a DB, and Notre Dame's not a school that's produced a lot of highly drafted defensive backs at the cornerbacks, I should say. They've produced a couple first-round picks of safety the last decade, but not at corner. They haven't had a first-round pick at corner since 1993.
Crazy.
They haven't had a second-round pick at corner since Allen Rossum, which I think was like 99 or 2000. And when you're going against LSU and Ohio State, that matters. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And I know Ohio State liked him a lot. LSU liked him a lot. His former high school coach got hired by Brian Kelly as his new corners coach. So for a time, Notre Dame went from number 1, and they kind of fell down to number 3. They slowly charged back up, and I think surpassed Ohio State relatively quickly with Christian Gray.
Mm-hmm.
And then it became about Notre Dame and LSU. And LSU was considered the leader for a while, Ryan. And we believe, and we've said this before on the show, so we're not repeating anything we haven't said before. We believe that over the last month and a half that Notre Dame has climbed back and taken the lead. It started to change about a month and a half, 2 months ago. Sean wrote an article, Ryan, where he said that he started to say like Notre Dame's moving, like making a move, right? Like just, and they stayed on him. And I remember talking to someone who said, look, it doesn't matter where he goes. Notre Dame's going to continue to recruit him like until signing day, because the thought from the Notre Dame folks was this is a Notre Dame kid. He just may not know it yet. Right. And it may take us longer than we thought to make him realize that he's a Notre Dame kid. And it didn't take him as long, which says a lot about this staff. Mike Mickens did a great job on this. Marcus Freeman, Chad Bowden did a great job on this. So he is going to make his decision Sunday night. Did you get the time, Ryan? Did you find
4
that?
o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So he'll make his decision on 4 o'clock. It's going to be Notre Dame, LSU, or Ohio State. Really, it's come down to Notre Dame and LSU. And, like I said, we feel really good about where things are trending for Notre Dame in this recruitment. So this is another potential big one. And again, these aren't kids. None of these kids are like, it's a 3-star kid that we think is going to be good. These are guys that everybody thinks are good players to some degree. So this is another one that's to me, a really big one for Notre Dame if they're able to close this one out and finish off the direction that we feel it's been going for a while.
It's something where the staff very early on identified Christian Gray was their guy, right? And that's over guys like Malik Muhammad, who we liked a ton. They saw Christian Gray and they said, that's the guy in this class for us, right? And you said I believe he's ranked number 51 overall.
Rivals has a number at Rivals, yeah.
Yeah, so Rivals has him very high. I think that Christian Gray is one of those players that could play early on at Notre Dame because I think that he's a very savvy, instinctual player who has a good all-around profile, has good length to him, has good speed. Everything just kind of checks boxes, and he really understands how to play the game. A very kind of advanced understanding of how to play the cornerback position, and he's Notre Dame's guy. So I credit them so much for this one, Brian, because we look at it and we just say, like, again, when things are trending away, sometimes it's easy to take the foot off the gas a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of be like, wow, this just isn't going to be our guy.
Right.
Notre
or
Dame,
to make it, what they would do in the past, Ryan, is they would say, well, he's not, this is what they would do. When they were trending away, they would give up in a lot of different positions. They would just give up and then you start getting phone calls and text messages from your source saying, well, he wasn't really a fit. We've moved on to other guys. We liked other guys better. And it's like the last staff, the people that I knew and the source I had, you'd thought they never missed on a kid. That every time they didn't get a recruit, it's because they chose not to take them, which drove me freaking nuts. But this staff, when they fell behind, said, okay, you know what? Like you said, Ryan, we got to step things up and we got to keep pushing. And they did not take getting passed up with him, a kid that they knew they had to get, easily. They really ramped things up and did it the right way. It wasn't just pressure. It was, okay, let's make sure we continue to really emphasize why we think that we're the best fit for this young man.
100%. Yeah. It's when adversity hits, and this is extreme cliche, that's when the hard work comes. And Notre Dame staff was just like, we got to put our head down here, right? Like, we got to get back into this one. We got to flip the script. I mean, it's not just something where, oh, it's hard. Let's move on. Let's go to the next kid. Notre Dame has been on this one. They've had a lot of effort in this one, and they've put themselves as the team to beat going into Monday's decision with Christian Gray, who is a very good player. And Notre Dame has obviously made him a high priority, and all it is left now is to close the deal over the next couple days.
So that's the 5. As of right now, that's the 5, right? And these are all must-gets. I mean, we can kind of talk about, like not every kid is a must get. Some kids are easily replaceable. Like if you don't get that kid, there's other kids like him, right? These are kids that Notre Dame cannot have the class that they need to have. And I'm not talking about rankings. I'm talking about they cannot have a gap closing class, Ryan, if they don't get all five of these kids. Four of these kids in the I'm focusing on the 2023 class. So to me, this is big for them. They have to hit. I mean, I'm talking not like 3 or 4. They've got to hit all 4, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree. I mean, this is the moment, man. This is where you can accentuate and you can really put your foot down and say, like, yes, we have a chance in the number one class. And I know everyone is going to hyper focus on quarterback in 2023. And like, I get it. I understand. I hear you.
Right.
Yeah. But it's something where if you keep piling on talented player out of talented player, you are going to solidify how special of a class this is. And they have an opportunity. I mean, we're talking about not obviously Cam Williams 2024 kid, but you have a chance to end the deal on 5 guys in 6 days. Like that is a tremendous. Have you ever heard of that, by the way? Like that is a crazy stretch. 5 recruits in 6 days. That's
no. I mean, the
nuts.
only time I could ever remember there being a lot of that was like back in the day when most kids would make their decisions around signing day.
Yeah.
You'd get like 3 or 4 kids the day before signing day or 2 days before signing day, but nothing like this. Like I remember a couple years ago, Notre Dame had a really good month of July with like 2 or 3 kids. Like Cam Hart committed on July 4th, and I think Brennan Clark also committed on July 4th. So they ended up like getting 2 kids on July 4th because there's kids that like to do that. There's a lot of kids that like to commit on July 4th, and a lot of times the reason is because you're at some family gathering, right? And it's a chance to celebrate and those type of things. So we've seen that, but I'm going to look, Ryan, and kind of, because I think it's not just about the 6, but it's 6 over the summer, like 5 out of 6 days over the course of the summer, which is supposed to be kind of the slow time. And it's not even like it's happening like during visits, but last year they signed 3 kids in July. They got Jaden Bellamy on the 2nd. They got Jalen Steed on the 12th and Benjamin Morrison on the 15th. So the entire month of July. And if you look at June and July, and again, this is a Notre Dame class that finished 6th in the nation last year. And they got, 3 kids in June. Where's Notre Dame at right now in June in 2023? They didn't get a lot of 2023 kids in June, right? It was mostly 2024 kids, right?
Yes.
So they got, because they got, May was the month. They got Absher in May. Mm-hmm. They got Pendleton, I think, in May, correct. They got Jalen Lamar in May. Devin Houston in May. Pendleton was April. They got Devin Houston, Sullivan Absher, and Jalen Lamar in May. And then in June, I'm trying to think who they even got in June. Most of it's been 2023 kids in June. Yeah. Obviously, they got CJ Carr. They got Owen Wafel in June was also – no, he was in May as well. Or no, he was in May as well. And then they got Jack Larson. Looking at it here, they got Joe Otting and Elijah Page at the beginning of the month. Okay. So it's going to be an offensive line month is the way things are going to end up turning out for Notre Dame. So they got 3 kids in May, 2 kids in June, which is kind of on par, but they were kind of spread out. And then go back to 2019 was the year I was looking at, Ryan. So they got in July, they only had 2 kids in July period, and that was Cam Hart and Brendan Clark, both committed on July 4th in the 2019 class. Mm-hmm. So I mean I just don't remember a time where they got this many kids, this compacted, and even just from a volume standpoint. Because if you look at the other June commitments, they got Page, they got Otting, if they're able to get Jaggasol. So you got 3 offensive linemen, you got CJ Carr in June, you got Jack Larson in June. Let me go to the 24 class here real quick, because I can't remember Wafel when he was May. Yeah, he was in May. So you got Carr and Larson. If they're able to get Cam Williams, that's 6 June kids right there in the 2 classes. And then potentially you're going to get 2 more kids in July. And I highly anticipate Notre Dame getting at least 1 or 2 more kids in July, in my opinion.
Agree.
So I don't think they're done after Christian Gray for the month. But like you said, Ryan, it just isn't often you see this many kids committing this consecutively to one school, if that's what happens. Yeah. And you definitely don't see it at this time of the year. Like this, again, this is sort of supposed to be the slow time. Even with the officials, it's supposed to be the slow time of the year.
And you have some big time kids, obviously, right? Like we've just spent time talking about Charles Jaggasol, who's ranked as the number 7 player in the country by a platform. We're talking about guys like Micah Bell and Christian Gray that are ranked in the top 100. Cam Williams, who's ranked as a top 150 kid by multiple platforms. Like we're talking about a string of really talented football players. And I think that's also big too, Brian, because, and let's be honest, the only thing people want to talk about is Dante Moore. And what's happening with the 2023 quarterback talk and all this type of stuff.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, recruits out there are also looking at that talking point. But now, if you have a string of that, that's where to capture momentum again, man. Like if you land 5 recruits of that caliber in a 6-day span, for a moment, you're going to be like, oh, wow, it doesn't really like. I trust this staff.
Maybe
They know what they're doing.
Yeah, they don't have a quarterback, but they got one next year, and look what they're doing. And I think the momentum is needed because they've done well in June in 23. I mean, you got 2 linemen that you needed. That the line class needed to fill up, right? And they got 2 kids they liked. If you're able to get Jaggasol, that's a big one. But now you've not only is it the numbers right, but you could potentially solidify 2 whole position groups. This with how it fills out, right? You're done. You're done with your needs at corner. Now, I think that they're not done at corner because from what we're told by our sources, they still want Josiah Wagner. They'd like a 3rd corner in his class, but 2 is the need, right? That's where your need is. You've met your need on the offensive line, and now you've kind of now you're halfway to where you need to be at receiver as opposed to. Well, they got 1 guy, they need 4. Now you're at least halfway, and you can hopefully then close out on some other guys. So I think it's important to not only I think the momentum piece is important, Ryan. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm trying to build on to what you said, which is great, in that it not only gives them momentum, but it also fills very important needs in this 2023 class and continues to get the 24 class rolling with just yet another. I mean, think about 4 of the 5, they'll have the number 1 class in 2024, partly because of volume. Not a lot of teams have 5 kids committed, but it's also highly ranked guys. You'll have 5 kids, 4 of them are from the north, 3 of them are from your backyard, either Indiana or a state that borders Indiana. 3 are in your backyard. That is big. That is big for Notre Dame because you got 2 from Michigan and 1 from Illinois. The kid that lives the furthest away is probably CJ Carr. I think, and that's like 2.5, 3 hours away. And I kind of joked with somebody recently that the NIL deal that CJ Carr needs is like with some gas company to give him like a gas card, right? That's the NIL deal that CJ Carr needs.
I think everybody needs that right now. Let's be honest.
Don't be selfish. We got to give it to the 5-star quarterback. No, I'm kidding.
All I know is I put I put $10 in my tank yesterday because I just had a $10 bill on me and it didn't even give me a quarter of a tank. So it is
Ryan. We have several truck drivers in our audience. They do not want to hear you complaining about having to put $10. One of them sent me a text message the other day and it was like a couple $100 to like several $100.
That's crazy. Well, that and it's affecting my parents have like the RV and stuff, and it's just like they're not getting diesel fuel right now to go anywhere nice, like no thank you.
Like the other day it fell below $5 in Indiana. I was like, yeah, it's going down. It's like, okay, it's really sad.
Gross, man.
Anyway, different conversation for a different day and not this channel. But it is important to get that momentum going, Ryan. And so what we're going to do next at this point in the show, Ryan, I want us to kind of take a look at just kind of go through the confidence level. And then, like I said before, we've done this a couple times. We did with receivers. We did one, I think, last Monday. We just kind of went through the recruits on the board. We've talked about, our confidence level, I would say accurately, Ryan, I've instituted a new rule. You can't say 10 unless the kid is committed. But because Ryan was throwing out tens all last week.
I'm a confident guy, man.
My Varsity Blues impersonation there, but my clean version, like the TBS version of Varsity
You
Blues.
just need a picnic named Bacon now, and we'll be good to go.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. But before we digress too much, we're going to kind of wrap it up. And this is probably going to be the last time we do this until maybe the end of the summer. As we kind of get into fall camp, we may do it again. But we're going to kind of go through really, I think we have the whole board listed here, Ryan, of everyone that's right now considered a serious target. I would say, is it safe to say, Ryan, that right now that of all the kids we just talked about with commitments coming up, that we're like 9.5 confidence level on all those, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we feel like Notre Dame's in a good place with all of them.
Yes, I would say
So
that.
we're going to go through the rest of the 2023 class, and we're just going to kind of give you the latest. We're going to give you our confidence level and then explain why for each one, and kind of go from there. And the first one, I just want to get it out of the way. Let's do Dante Moore, right? And I'm at a 3 right now. I think right now Dante is not going to pick Notre Dame. I do anticipate him making a decision soon. I don't believe it's going to be for Notre Dame. I'm going to have a lot to say about this when it happens. It'll all be on the premium board. It won't be here. But I also, there's a lot that has to happen, right? I do think that if Notre Dame were to be able to right their ship, so to speak, assuming if CJ Carr doesn't reclassify, which I do know there's still conversations about that. But if he stays to where he is now, which is not reclassify, then there's some things that I think could change this. But the reality is that's not the reality right now, right? So I'm going to go 3 because I just think that there has been enough that has happened that Notre Dame has done. His recruitment has been impacted negatively by reporting. Some of it, I think, has been an error and an egregious error. And all of that has factored in along with, I think, a lot of very important influences around him that did not want him at Notre Dame have all contributed to why I don't see this one working out for Notre Dame. I'm going to still go 3 because even if he commits somewhere else, the recruitment's not over yet. And I do know that, that's all I'm going to say. I'm almost kind of went into a different direction, but I'm not going to go there right now. I'm just going to leave it there. And when that time is right, we'll have plenty to say. We'll have plenty to say about this one, but that's where I'm at, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm about a 2 or a 3. I'll say 2 just to one up you, I guess. But actually not one up you at all. But because how you
one up me from a negative standpoint. I get it. I get it.
Yeah. All I'll say about this one is everything Brian highlighted. I just want to quickly say though, there's been a lot of negativity towards Dante, both on the board and on Twitter, and I think it's very unfortunate, and I don't think it is correct, if we're being completely honest. Dante Moore is a 17-year-old kid who I believe would like to make a certain move, but there are other factors that are preventing him from making that move. And we won't go super in depth on that.
There will be a time and a place for that. Yes.
100%. All I'll say is I think that some people need to kind of slow your roll on blaming Dante Moore and going at Dante Moore. That's all I'll say about it.
We can say ultimately this is Dante's decision, right? It's his decision. He ultimately gets to make whatever decisions he wants, but there's not a wrong decision. It's just his decision. It may work out for him. It may not. I will say this: if you're someone listening to this chat, and I hope that people like that, and you are tweeting negative things to Dante or about Dante, the issue isn't Dante at that point in time, right? Like I have strong feelings about it, and I would have advised him differently, and I'll have some things about it, but it's more of just a guidance standpoint. I think that there has been a narrative crafted about Dante that's due partly to his dad and partly to how he has been reported about. That's very unfortunate. And anyone that knows Dante Moore at all knows this is a really good kid. And he just, as a junior in high school, he just got back-to-back 4.0s. This is a good kid. I don't necessarily like the way his recruitment has gone on. I don't like the decision that I think he's going to make. On my standpoint, at the end of the day, I'm not Dante.
Right.
But it doesn't make him a bad kid. And I think a lot of the way that some Notre Dame fans, and not a lot of, a lot of people in this chat have, hey, look, I'm just tired of talking about it. It's not about Dante. It's not a negative towards him. It's just, I'm tired of talking about it. And so am I, to be honest with you. So I don't have a problem with that. But
because it's very frustrating, Brian, because like there's a lot that you want to talk about and a lot that you want to put out there, but you just can't at the moment, right? So it gets frustrating when you can't put the full picture.
And that's why I've asked people for patience. Like because this is what's happened. Like there are 2 big time recruits in this class whose recruitment is going to be very negatively impacted by people who have reported really egregious things, right? Some of which has been repeated in this chat, which I'm going to pull up when we get to the Q&A session. And that's why I just wish more people would kind of take a this isn't politics. This isn't war. This isn't like a serious issue where you just got to get it out no matter what. Sometimes it's okay to say, you know what, I'm going to wait till this is played out before I say everything. And unfortunately, some people decided not to do that, and it's going to have a negative impact on a couple of recruitments specifically for Notre Dame. Right. And so that's why we've tried to. It kind of explains why we've taken sort of a hands-off approach. There's a lot I'm going to say about this, but it's got to be done at the right time and once all the information is collected. But yes, Dante Moore's a good kid. I don't like his decision, but it's not a dislike in that I feel negatively towards the young man. I think it sucks for Notre Dame to a degree, and it sucks for Notre Dame fans because I think Notre Dame fans would have loved that kid being their quarterback. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. So that is my last Dante Moore comment on this channel. Unless something changes, when I do have things to say about him, it will be on the premium message board. Just for a million different reasons why. So that is where we are. So now we can move on and stop talking about Dante Moore on this chat or on this channel and in chats. Okay. Agreed, everybody? No more Dante Moore talk. He's not picking Notre Dame right now, so we can move on. Let's kind of keep the negative train rolling, and then we'll start talking about some more positive, and that's Richard Young. We were at a 3 and a 4 last time right after his visit.
Yep.
A part of my 4 was still thinking that Notre Dame had a shot at Dante Moore. Notre Dame has no chance of getting Richard Young if they don't have Dante Moore in this class. Like 99% positive that he, so I mean, I'm at like a 1 right now. Yeah. And, I think Dylan McCullough has done a great job recruiting him. The staff did a great job recruiting him, but that's just not one of those battles you're going to win if you don't have some needle moving things going in your favor. And he is one of those kids I don't think picks Notre Dame because just the fact you can't overcome Bama and Georgia and potentially now Oregon if things go well for them with Dante Moore over the next week or two. That's just, I mean, that was another finalist for him, and they were just on a visit together. But Ryan, they had, I mean, again, no chance. We didn't think they had much of a chance anyway. I mean, at the highest moment of last week, right after the visit, we were 3 and a 4. I think I'm at a 1 right now with Richard.
Yeah, I was thinking about the same 1 or 2. I mean, I don't know how you could feel good about it without Dante in the class. I mean, you kind of summed it up perfectly. And I just want to answer this one real quick, Brian. Nate Galino, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. What is the premium message board? I'm newer here. So, Nate, I'm going to take your comment off because if you go to the bottom of the screen, boards.irishbreakdown.com, you can go there and you can sign up for the membership where we put a lot of intel and things that we can't really, put out into the public at that time type of thing. So you get a little inside information if you would like to join the message board.
It's $4.99 a month and $49.99 for a year. You also get discounts to the merch store sent to you if you sign up. So you definitely want to take advantage of that, Nate. Absolutely. We love to have you on the channel. We've read a couple of his questions recently, so it's good to have him aboard. So Richard Young, we can move on. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The other running back, Jeremiah Love. This is a really interesting one, Ryan, because I don't believe we did a confidence level for him last time.
I don't think so either.
And so this is an interesting one. I'll let you start off because you're a little bit closer to this one since you talked to Jeremiah. He's made all his visits. I think Alabama's made a run. Missouri's made a run. Several schools have made a run at him. Notre Dame obviously has made a run at him. Where do you see things standing right now? First of all, what's your confidence level, and where do you see things standing with him, his latest in his recruitment?
I will go with a 7 on this one because I think that Notre Dame has an opportunity to close it on Jeremiah Love, but the fact of the matter is that there's still other programs that are involved, right? Like this isn't for me. I think Notre Dame is still jockeying for positioning. I think that they're right at the top, but I don't even know if there is necessarily a team that I would peg as the leader, unquote. Like I just don't know if there is that team right now, but I do think Notre Dame has as good a chance as anyone right now. So I will say that it is a 7. I do think that they have a good chance at Jeremiah Love if they push the right buttons down the stretch.
I'm at a 6 right now, and my 6 will move down to a 5 if he decides to take his recruitment into the fall. It would, because I just feel like Notre Dame has been the leader or in the lead group for a while, And I feel like if they can't close it this summer, Ryan, and I'm not as confident that they will as I was maybe 3 weeks ago, just because I think some other programs have continued to ascend. There's some SEC schools really pushing hard that I think he's got some really legitimate interest in. So I'm at a 6, and if he decides to not commit by September 1st, basically, I'll probably drop it to a 5, and then it won't change until we find out that he's coming for a game and seeing how that goes. So that's where I'm at with Jeremiah Love.
That's fair.
Now we're going to get into some positive news. We'll get that out of the way first. Let's talk about the Notre Dame receiving corps. We're going to start with Ronan Hannafin. He wrapped up his visits. He made a visit to Alabama. It was an interesting trip. We'll get into someday. Just regards to just the timing of it, had to get kind of thrown off because of some travel issues that had nothing to do with Bama or the Hannafins. Just stuff happens. Things continue to go great there. Bama has also since kind of clarified a little bit on his position. Now they're kind of talking about the Christian Harris position a little bit for him, for him, but
so
it's still defense.
So more off ball. Yeah.
Yeah. Still more defense for him. Went to BC the following weekend. That staff has done a great job with the Massachusetts kids and getting Ronan Hannafin on campus. I believe his older brother, I believe, is on the team there at BC. They've done a great job there. But nothing has changed my opinion on this with Ronan Hannafin. I'm still 9.5. Again, until the decision is made, I'll say this. A part of me wants to go to 9, even down to 9, just because how good of a job Clemson especially has done with him. Bama's not going to be a player just because I think the defensive push, they've done a great angle, but I really think he wants a shot on offense. Mm-hmm. And Tuscaloosa is just a little different animal, I think, for a kid from Massachusetts than in even South Carolina. But Dabo Swinney especially has done a tremendous job with Ronan and his entire family. And I've talked to several sources that he loves Clemson. I mean, they've done a tremendous job with him. But at the end of the day, I've never felt that it was to the point where anyone else would catch Notre Dame. But Clemson has made it a lot stickier than maybe I would have said a couple months ago. And kudos to them for that. But I still feel really, really good about where Notre Dame stands on this one. There's no question about it.
I was at a 9.5 as well. So for everything that you just put out there, it's something where I feel like Notre Dame has been in a great position for a long time. And the fact that it may be winding down here soon, I think is tremendous for Notre Dame because again, when you're the perceived top school, when a timeline is very understandable and it's coming to an end potentially, I think that you start to feel a lot better about it. So I'd say 9.5. And I do also applaud Clemson because I think that for a while it was just kind of like Notre Dame's to lose. And then
it was a foregone conclusion for a long time.
Right. Exactly.
And Clemson and Bama and BC, all of them, and especially Clemson and Alabama, gave them a lot to think about. And to the point where it's like, until he announces a decision date, like, or makes a decision, like, like this one, this is they've done it because again, you're talking about Clemson and Alabama, like the two premier programs the last decade. Yep. And I just think it also says a lot. Georgia has tried to get into the mix lately. They tried hard to get that last visit weekend and it didn't work. It just says a lot that's happening, about a kid that's now 3 of the 4 services now have him as a 4-star. But none of them have him in their top group. Like he's not in the 247. He's not in the top Rivals 250. He's not in the ESPN 300, which, I still find kind of hilarious, to be honest with you. But this is a big time kid, in my opinion. But, again, they got to close, right? They got to close this one out. And as of right now, Ronan has not said when he's going to commit. So we think, talking to sources, we think a summer decision will happen. But Ronan has not said that publicly or even privately. For example, I have not been given a date. Like, I'm not told, hey, it's going to happen then. We just kind of feel like, talking to various sources, that it could happen this summer. We wouldn't be surprised if it happened this summer. I'll say this though, Ryan, if it doesn't happen this summer, like we anticipate, then that's when I think you'd start to get a little bit nervous, right? Is if he decides he doesn't want to commit right now. But we feel good about him making a summer decision, and we feel like Notre Dame is still the team to beat for Ronan Hannafin.
Agree completely. Can I just throw something up real quick, Brian? Because we had Archers just said Jason Moore just confirmed the July decision. We broke that, I think, 2 weeks ago, just so you know, Archer.
Yeah.
It will be happening sometime in July. I just double-checked Jason's Twitter and everything, and I don't see anything updated announcements. So yeah, we will be expecting sometime in July there will be a
Did he
decision.
put anything on like his Instagram? I know some of these kids put stuff on their Instagram stuff about decision dates.
If there's an exact date,
No, I don't see
I'm not
anything
sure.
new. I just see the top 5 still.
Yep. So I think it's just the
Yeah.
fact that he will be committing sometime in July, but there's not an exact date.
Yeah. So
No worries,
I mean,
no worries, Archer.
if you do see something like that, if there is a report somewhere, just let us know below of who's reporting that. But yeah, we've always anticipated a July decision for Jason Moore, who we'll get to. We'll get to here very soon. All right. So next up is Jaden Greathouse. Ryan, we talked about Jaden Greathouse last week during a receiver show. We both gave 9s. Really hasn't been anything new. I think we're both kind of still there. We talked a lot about him yesterday. There's not a lot new there. We don't need to spend a whole lot of time there. But I think that Notre Dame, I'll say this. I think the gap between school number 1 and school number 2 is even larger for Jaden Greathouse than it is for Ronan Hannafin.
Yeah. I mean,
as of right now.
I mean, honestly, if you had to give me an answer and I said, who is the number 2 school for Jaden Greathouse, who would you say? Would you say Texas? South Carolina? I don't know who I would say.
Probably Texas, probably.
I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a situation where I don't know who's coming from the pack to like right now, and things can change because we've talked a lot about the timeline for Jaden Greathouse potentially going into the fall and all that good stuff. All I know for now, I remain the same at a 9 because I think that Notre Dame is the clear leader right now. So that's all it is at the moment.
They just got to stay that way, right? Because there's a couple other kids that we don't think they're going to get that for a long time it was who's the number 2 for the quarterback? Who's the number 2 for Dante Moore? There wasn't one. And we saw how that played out. So that's why I say anytime a kid that we think is going to decide now takes it into the fall, like if right now Jaden Greathouse has said he's going to be a fall decision. I think that could change, which is where my 9 comes from. I will say this. If he takes this into the fall and he sets visits to Texas and Oklahoma and Notre Dame, that's going to leave opportunities for other schools who miss out on receivers to make rises as well, Ryan. And that to me is when my 9 decreases. But for right now, I'm still confident with a 9. Mm-hmm. Here's an interesting one. Micah Tees. This is an interesting one. You had 6.5 last time. I had 5. So let's talk about where we are with our confidence level with Micah Tees, Ryan, and I'll allow you to begin.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm the same, right? Like I haven't heard anything that would change my mind either way. So I'm going to stick with a 6.5. I think that Notre Dame's in the conversation. We'll see if they're able to close. It's a USC Notre Dame battle, in my opinion. And I don't think much has changed since the last time we talked about Micah, at this point. So, and we need to get obviously a more thorough understanding of what the timeline exactly looks like and just kind of chat a little bit. But I don't think much has changed on that end, so I'm gonna stick at my 6.5 for now.
I'm actually gonna raise mine up to a 6. To be honest with you.
Love it.
I still feel USC is the team to beat. But the fact that he did not commit coming out of that visit, and the fact that I still hear really positive vibes about the relationship that the Notre Dame offense. Because here's the thing, the Notre Dame offensive staff is kind of new on to Micah. Because for a while there, it was Mike Mickens, it was Chad Bowden, it was Marcus Freeman. It was like defensive coaches that were kind of, Chris O'Leary was involved. It was the defensive coaches that had really worked on Micah because early on they reviewed him as a secondary option. Who, if you want to play offense, you can. Well, as he turned into more like Ronan Hannafin, that was similar to Ronan Hannafin's situation, right? Mm-hmm. But as he has transitioned to being more of I want to be an offensive guy, similar to Ronan, then it is a situation where the offensive staff has had to start to build that relationship with him. And so to me, I just feel like that actually gives me a little bit more of a positive vibe for where Notre Dame is right now than I was a couple of weeks ago, because as you kind of hear about, okay, so he is just now starting to build a relationship with Chancey Stuckey. He is just now starting to build a relationship with Tommy Rees. Guys that really he didn't know. That actually makes me feel a little bit better because Notre Dame hasn't used all their best, weapons, so to speak, in his recruitment. And they've been able to gain on USC, and then USC wasn't able to pull way back ahead after the visit. And now, again, I still think there's a long way to go on this one as far as closing him out, but I feel a lot better today than I did a couple weeks ago or even a week ago, like a week and a half ago when we did this last Monday. So I have kind of, starting to see some positive momentum where we used to think they had a great shot at him. That faded. Now I'm starting to feel a little better about where this one's trending. Now you just got to keep going down that path and not lose that momentum. I think that's going to be important. And something I learned talking to Sean Davis is Micah Tease and Christian Gray are really good friends and have been since they were freshmen in high school. That's something that Sean had informed me of, which I didn't know. If Christian Gray picks Notre Dame, which we feel good about right now, I think that helps their case. Because I believe they, in one of the IPC things, they did talk about, that how they've talked about maybe going to school together and all that kind of stuff. Well, Christian Gray is not going to USC. I can assure you of that.
Yep.
And he may not pick Notre Dame. We think he will, but if he picks somebody else, it's not going to be USC. Well, that's the only other school. Notre Dame's the only other school that they're both on. So I don't get into the whole package deal thing. Those don't often pan out. But it's one of those things where could it be a tiebreaker? Yeah, I think it could. So I think they just got to keep the momentum going. I'm not ready to jump to 6.5 or 7 yet, Ryan, but I have jumped up from a 5 to a 6. So I do think things are trending in somewhat of a positive direction for Notre Dame here with Micah Tease.
I love it.
Monroe Freeling. Let's talk about this one. We're not going to talk a lot about it because, again, there's a time and a place where we'll have a lot to say about it. Now is not the time. Ryan, we haven't changed. You have said this. You haven't changed. You're 6.5. I'm at a 5. I just don't see that one working out for Notre Dame right now. And I don't know if it's necessarily something I would say is anything Notre Dame has done, but I just think right now other programs have some momentum with him that Notre Dame once had that I think has been lost. And we'll get into why at some point in time on the premium board, why that is the case. So anything you want to add to the Monroe Freeling one?
Yeah, no, it's going to be compelling conversation when we can kind of take you all a little more behind the scenes on the message board about this one. But, it's not over. I think Notre Dame still has a chance, but, it's gotten a little murkier is all I'll say about it.
Yeah. So let's go defense. It was brought up earlier by Archer, and I just saw the tweet in question. It's very funny how some people will spin things, Ryan. And I just read the tweet that you sent me, and it was from an Ohio State person who I don't think very highly of. And it was basically confirming he will make a July decision, which, as Ryan pointed out, we've been talking about for weeks at Irish Breakdown. And the post was, they said that it's a Notre Dame Ohio State battle. I've been told by sources I have that it's a Notre Dame Penn State battle. We'll see. It's those three schools.
Yep.
But it's the tweet was like, it's interesting that he's thinking about a commitment post Ohio State visit. And I'm like, this is why people don't trust the media, right? Because that makes it seem like coming out Ohio State visit, he's now ready to make a decision. That's nonsense. This has been true. We reported on this weeks ago. And this is why it just drives me nuts that this is what the recruiting industry's turned into in a lot of ways, right? It's clickbait, it's spin. And then the reason they do it is because in the recruiting world, it's easy to report something isn't true or is spun a certain way. And then if the kid changes his mind and goes somewhere else, well, at the time that was true, but the kid changed his mind. And sometimes that is true, right?
Sure.
It is true that at times, but it's easy to use that as your crutch when you report something that is exaggerated or not true or spun or whatever the case may be. And it just drives me nuts. It really drives me nuts. So to act like him confirming he's committing in July after the Ohio State visit shows Ohio State's trending. They may very well be, but those two things have nothing to do with each other for a kid who said before his visits even started that he was going to commit in July, he said to us. So it's
very hack stuff, man. Because I'm really not trying to pat us on the back too much here. Trust me, I'm not. But it's like this morning, I'm like thinking about, let's do some deep research into a All-American list that I'm going to be putting out pretty soon for like the recruiting side of things. I'm trying to think of like different and unique ways to try to, get good information out there. And then we just have people that are regurgitating things that we already know, which is, it's
annoying.
It's
very, very annoying. It's like, I think hack is the right word for some of those people. It's
hack. Yeah.
It drives me nuts. Just a reminder, y'all, we will be doing a Q&A afterwards. So when we wrap this up, so if you do have some questions you want to get in, we have some start already. Go and throw those in now. But yeah, that stuff drives me nuts. So let's talk about Jason Moore, however. Now that he's been to Penn State this June, he went to Notre Dame this June, and obviously he wrapped things up with Ohio State. I think those are the three that are the main players here, right?
Yeah.
And depending on who you talk to, there's a different school. One of those three school leads for him, depending on who you talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, where are you at? Obviously, we have not, in full disclosure, we have not been able to follow up with Jason post Ohio State visit. We've talked to different sources, but we haven't spoken specifically to Jason or his mom since then. So just want to make sure everybody understands the data points we're working with here.
Mm-hmm.
So Ryan, where are you at with this one?
I'm going to go with an 8. I think that Notre Dame is,
so you're down just a tad from last time. You
was
were
I,
at
an 8.5 last time? 9? Okay.
9, yeah. Based on what you sent me earlier today.
Yeah. I think that for me, we've known that there's a timeline. We know about what time, what time frame he'll be making a decision, Jason Moore. We know that Notre Dame is in the top 2 or 3. I would venture to say that they're the top school, but it's a conversation because he just finished up the trip to Ohio State and he's visited Penn State and he's on the visit trail, which got delayed a little bit because of his brother's injury, obviously, for Villanova. So I think Notre Dame is still in a very good spot. I think there is it's very simply, you have to close against a couple big players, man.
Right.
Like Ohio State has not developed defensive linemen great the last couple years, but they do have the string of like Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, Chase Young.
And that's not good. That long ago. I mean,
right,
you know what I mean? It's not like these kids were in the 5th grade when that happened, right? I mean,
Chase Young's going into his 3rd year this year. So it's not it's still very recent history, right? So Ohio State's done that, and then we know that Jason has always, thought highly of Penn State. Sure. So, like, it's going to be a 3-way battle. It is. I think Notre Dame still has a good chance, though. So I'm going to say an 8 right here.
I agree. I'm with you on that. I still feel like Notre Dame has done a great job here. Obviously, Ohio State's success at DeMatha is concerning. Larry Johnson, even though he has done, in my opinion, a poor job the last few years of actually coaching, I think that he's still considered a D-line legend. Right. It's like Harry Hiestand, right? I mean, the legend's going to trump sometimes the current results. I'm not saying that's what I believe with Harry Hiestand. I'm just saying like Harry Hiestand hasn't coached a game in college football in 5 years is my point. And yet he comes in and all of a sudden, bam, Notre Dame's getting these top kids because of that reputation is my point from 5 years ago. That's my comparison. I don't think Harry Hiestand's lost a step as a coach like I think Larry Johnson has. Larry Johnson is also significantly older than Harry Hiestand, I believe. Like I believe Harry Hiestand is like what, 63? Let me look it up here real quick. Yeah, he is 63, correct. And Larry Johnson Sr. is, let's see here real quick. He's 70.
Wow.
So, Harry's not a spring chicken, and he's still almost a decade younger than Larry Johnson. So he looks good for 70, though. I'm not even going to lie to you.
That's what I'm about to say. I was like, he's done well for himself.
And I hate talking about this because I'm not saying this is like, but there's been rumblings for the last couple of years about how he's on the verge of retiring and some stuff like that. And that stuff's out in the ether as well. So we'll kind of see how that goes. But it's still Ohio State and it's still Larry Johnson, and that makes them formidable. And of course, Penn State's there too. I'm still with you. I still think Notre Dame is the leader as of right now. I'm going to stay where I was last time and be at a 7. I think.
Fair.
I think they're still there. Notre Dame's battling. I still like Notre Dame, but I think it's too close of a battle for me, even though I think Notre Dame leads, for me to be as confident like 8-9. I'm just not quite there yet.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go linebacker. Start with Jaden Ausberry from Louisiana. He wrapped up his official visits. He's been to, I think, A&M and Michigan since his Notre Dame visit.
Yep.
He has talked in the past about being a fall decision. That could very well happen. I would not be surprised if he does wrap things up a little sooner. Kind of like Tobias Merriweather did last year. Once all the visits are over, I think if he decides this summer, this is where I want to go, I don't think he's going to arbitrarily carry things in the fall. Is my point.
Sure.
And that's kind of what happened with Tobias last year. Tobias intended to go into the fall and decide in December because he didn't anticipate kind of having his decision over with. But once he visited Notre Dame and then kind of saw some other places, it was a no-brainer that Notre Dame was where he wanted to be. And he said, get it over with. I could see that happening with Jaden Ausberry as well. even though that's not the plan as of right now. I could see that happening as well. And I'm 9. I'm very comfortable with where Notre Dame is right now. Even coming out of the visits, A&M, Michigan people are all saying our school's done a good job, but Notre Dame is still the leader. I mean, everybody says that, and of course, all of our intel is similar. So I'm at a 9 on Jaden Ausberry.
9.5. This is one where I didn't feel great about it for a long time, and then over the last few weeks, I feel great about it, and I think Notre Dame has done as well as you could in this situation, right? Because we thought he was a kid that's going to be tough to get out of the South, like not even just out of Louisiana, just in general out of the South. And Notre Dame has hit every good chord on this one. So I agree that I think that this one could end a little earlier than what we had anticipated at one point. And I think that Notre Dame is in the driver's seat. I'll put it like that.
Let's talk about a guy that we also didn't talk about last time, and that's Samuel Lepemba. So we haven't talked a lot about Samuel Lepemba for a while. He's made a lot of visits this summer, some official, some unofficial. Georgia, Missouri have been programs that are pushing. He was at Oregon recently for their big weekend visit. I don't know if that was an official or an unofficial. Right now, his official visit to Notre Dame is scheduled for November. Notre Dame basically is taking the chance, and I think it's a smart move, my opinion. Every move you make in recruiting you're taking a chance that this is going to be the strategy that works.
Sure.
What Notre Dame felt was, since he is adamant about waiting until December to commit, and you've been in a great place with him already, that they would rather let him kind of do all the summer stuff, have all those great vibes, then get him on campus officially much closer to the decision date, which will be for the Clemson game on November 7th. That is when he's scheduled to make his official visit to Notre Dame. So whether it'll work out or not, I don't know, Ryan, but I think it was the right move. Because look, sometimes, and one thing I'll say about one of my responses, the Dante Moore thing, is I am going to say then, and I'll say it now, that I have no problem with Notre Dame's decision to put all their eggs in the Dante Moore basket. I advocated for that, right? And sometimes it doesn't work out. Doesn't make the strategy wrong. It's what you need to do to even be in the game. However, with the Samuel Lepemba situation, Notre Dame was trying to push to get him on campus this summer because they thought there was a chance he could actually commit this summer. Once they read the situation to the point where like there was no way he was going to make a decision this summer, they then switched strategy and moved him to the fall. I think that was a smart move in his recruitment. Right. I think that was wise because he's already been on campus a couple times. And so I think that was smart. I'm at a 5 right now with him, though, just because we're so far away and there's so much could happen between now and then. I'm at a 5, but I would say that I'm not above a 5 with anybody else for him either. I kind of think this is kind of an open deal. I think Notre Dame is in this top group of 3 or 4 schools. I think the relationship that they build between now and December and how well that November visit goes, and Notre Dame's success in the field is going to have as big of an impact. There's 2 kids that Notre Dame's success in the field is going to have a huge impact with this year, and that is Pemba and Caleb Downs. Even if they pick other schools, I think it's going to have a big impact with both of them, especially Pemba. And so I think that's going to be a big thing in my – so I'm at a 5, but don't fret over that 5, because if I were to give you my level for every other school he's looking at, I wouldn't be higher than a 5 with anybody else either. I don't think there is a leader per se. I think there's a group of schools he really likes, and the next 5 months is going to determine which one of those schools he picks.
Yeah, I was going to say between a 5 and a 6, so I'll just split the difference and say 5.5, I guess. I mean, it's something where you felt good with Notre Dame for a while, but it's the process is kind of stringing along longer than you would anticipate. But it is huge that Notre Dame does have him coming for a game visit. I think that is tremendous. Now they have to knock that visit out of the park, obviously. So you're putting a lot of pressure on one visit, but I mean, it was going to end up being like that anyway, right? So I think that Notre Dame is in a good spot, but this one is one where we are going to have to continue to follow it for a little bit of time because we just don't have – we know it's going to be a fall decision, but we don't know exactly when it's going to pop.
If he had never visited Notre Dame or had only been to Notre Dame once, I would probably be more critical of the wait till November thing. Because I would say, look, you need to get him on campus now and then try to convince him to come up in November for an unofficial is what I would have said. But because he's been on campus twice already, I feel like he's kind of gotten the unofficial vibe already. So bring him on campus, let him experience that whole big weekend at Notre Dame. Because if it's unofficial, he kind of comes up Friday night, maybe Saturday, he leaves after the game, and this is a different deal. You can treat an official a lot different. And because Notre Dame is going to basically be full, that Clemson weekend is going to be a bunch of 24 kids. There's not going to be a whole lot of official visitors that weekend, unless it's a bunch of commits. Which you know what I mean?
Which they are planning. When I talk to Sam Pendleton, I know they're already talking about getting up for the Clemson game.
Right.
So that's going to be a big weekend for Notre Dame from the committed
perspective. Oh, there's going to be a ton of commits. What I'm saying is that's probably the weekend where a lot of the commits who haven't done officials yet are going to do officials. But most of their commits have done officials already.
It's true.
And so, but yes, it's going to be a loaded weekend. There's no doubt about it. So I like the strategy. I think the strategy makes sense. We'll find out if it works or not, but I'm comfortable with it. So I'm going to 5. Let's go Caleb Downs, Ryan. Yeah. I'm at where I was before. I'm at a 5. I think they've done well, but I just don't see this one happening.
Yeah, I think I was a 6 last time, if I remember correctly. I'm about the same. I'll say I'm a 5.5 or a 6. Yeah. I think that there's extreme interest, but I still think it's a long shot. And so I mean, nothing has changed, right? Like we know Caleb Downs likes Notre Dame. He's been in Notre Dame many times at this point. There's obvious interest there. But again, this kid is to the high. I mean, he is about as high profile of a recruit as you can see across the nation in 2023. So it's just there's a lot of suitors, man. There's a lot of pressure, and I get it. And he's got the Southern thing working for him. And there's just a lot of different layers to the recruitment, but he likes Notre Dame. So I'm not going to dove it down too low. I do think it's still a little unrealistic, if we're being completely honest about it.
I think for me, I'm actually probably going to go down to a 4 actually now. And here's the reason why is Notre Dame after that visit had gained a lot of momentum. For them to have a chance, they needed to be able to sustain that momentum. And that momentum was gone by the time he got on campus the next weekend. I think it was Bama was where he went the next weekend. And then he finished with Ohio State. There's no buzz from any of my, forget the national sources. I don't care what they say. They haven't thought Notre Dame had a shot on this one anyway. There's no buzz from any of my Notre Dame sources and other people that are connected to his recruitment to make me think Notre Dame has the kind of buzz that means like they may actually have tied or taken the lead. The kid's been on campus 4 or 5 times already. You did the official visit. The visit went phenomenal. Mom and dad loved it. Everything is great. And you still haven't been able to get on the same level with Bama and Georgia and Ohio State. What could Notre Dame possibly do at this point in time to change it? I think that's what I said. That's why the season it could be the only thing. The results on the field could be the only thing. I do think there are some people that say, "Hey, I love Coach Freeman. I love what he's doing, but I need to see if he can go win games." And if they can go, maybe knock off Ohio State or, maybe take Ohio State to the wire and then go beat Clemson, right? And then beat USC. I think those things could be about the only thing that could happen. But I just feel like there's really not a lot of, plays here for Notre Dame with a kid that I think loves Notre Dame, but he also loves Bama. He also loves Georgia. He also loves Ohio State. I still feel he stays down south. I know there's a lot of Ohio State buzz. I still feel like for all the sources I have, that aren't recruiting analysts are that he's still trending to staying down south. But, I think all 4 of those schools could get him. I just feel right now the Southern schools have kind of the momentum there. But I just feel like Notre Dame's chance was they had to come out of the summer at least like on the same level, those schools. And I think they're slightly below. And they're close, but they're slightly below. And but all the momentum they made from the visit is gone. And there's nothing. Some kids just do everything. You can do everything right, and you're just not going to get everybody. And I think that's the case for Caleb Downs. I don't know what it is that keeps him from wanting to make that move. I have no idea. It's nothing nefarious. It's not NIL. It's not. I just think he looks at it as I'm an elite football player, and my goals are to be this draft pick and do all this and win a championship. And of the 4 schools he's looking at, there's one school that doesn't consistently put top DBs into the first round. And in the last 15 years, Notre Dame has had 2 DBs taken in the first round. Mm-hmm. Georgia's had more than that in the last 5 years. Bama's had more than that in the last 3 years. Ohio State's had more in the last 5 years. And they've all won championships, and Notre Dame hasn't won one since his dad was young. That's just the reality. And there's going to be kids you're going to lose until you can change those things, right?
Sure.
And so that's why I say the season is the only thing that could potentially move Caleb Downs. But even then, I don't see it. One of the questions we had is, has Caleb brought his parents to campus multiple times?
Yep.
I mean, his parents have been on campus. They were on for the official. They were up on campus in November when his brother Josh was here to play Notre Dame. So they've been on campus multiple times. And his family loves it.
I was
Caleb
about to
loves
say,
it.
yeah. Yeah. They love
Right?
Notre Dame. Yep.
Right. But it's just we've said this before. You can love a place, but still love another place more. Or feel like as much as I love that place, I'm going to go here because this place is more proven to produce people like me to the level I want to get to.
Sure.
And that's just the reality sometimes. And there's nothing Notre Dame can say to prove that otherwise. It's about the doing. And that's the reality of it.
Yep.
All right. So last one, and I don't have one on this because I just don't know enough about his recruitment to change what I had last time. I was at a 6. Josiah Wagner, I haven't heard anything new on him. I think you were at a 5 last time, Ryan. So It's just about we've got to learn more about how he feels coming out of his Cal visit and the Notre Dame visit. So that's where we're at on that one. Nothing's changed. We have no new intel to change our opinion on that one. So
agree.
But I think it's going to, and I think what I said last time that holds true now, Ryan, is I'm not going to really care where they are with Josiah Wagner until after Micah Bell and Christian Gray make decisions. Because he could feel great right now, but then be like, they got 2 guys. I don't want to compete with that. Or not compete with that, but that sounded wrong. There may be another situation he views as better. I don't think a kid saying, like, why would I go to that school that has 2 kids that they offered earlier and have been recruiting longer than me? This school over here, I'm their number 1 guy. I'm going to go to the school where I'm the number 1 guy. I don't think that's a kid that's afraid of competition. And a lot of people like to turn it that way. And the way that I said that made it sound like that's what I was saying. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I could see that happening, and that would make some sense with some kids. So my point is, until those 2 kids are committed to Notre Dame, and we'll find out if that's going to happen over the next week, it's hard for me to really feel good about anything I've heard about Josiah Wagner. I want to hear what he thinks about Notre Dame after that. And if he still feels good after that, then I'll start saying, you know what? They got a shot to close on this kid.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I'm at for him. So,
yeah.
Okay.
I'm in the same spot until we have a little more intel on the situation, until we have an update on a couple of those visits. Like you said, there's nothing real that we can add to it, right? Like, I think that everything we're hearing is positive coming out of the visit, but eventually, like you just kind of talked about with Caleb Downs, it does wear off a little bit, right? Like that's the honeymoon kind of stage. We have to see what it's looking like weeks after the visit, if that really tells a lot of the truth.
Because they're still new to his recruitment. I mean, 100%. This hasn't been going on a long time. This is still kind of a newer recruitment for them. So that's where we are with our confidence levels. So I think we kind of went through that. There might be some new guys added to the board. This is going to really shake some things up over the next week, but I'm really looking forward to seeing where they are. We won't do this again until we get to the end of the summer and have a better idea of who is where. So Ryan, let's dive into our Q&A. We're going to wrap things up with some questions here. Did have a super chat here from Sean Kelly. Here's some money for vacation. Love the show and go Irish. I appreciate that very, very much. It's not so much money that I have that's the issue. It's time and having time to take a vacation. So I very much appreciate that. We also had a super chat from Zach Martin. How much to get Brian to do the Carlton gift dance on signing day? If Notre Dame gets the number 1 class and we get to the $500 mark in super chats that day, I will do the Carlton dance on air. Man, so I'm talking about the 23 class. So if on signing
you're a
day,
tough negotiator, man.
Yes, yes, because there's no coming back from certain things, Ryan. And so if you've got to make the price worth it at that point in time. So the odds of those things happening is probably not very high. John A1 says every class has some misses, but this staff is landing top guys at a success rate. We can be happy, folks. Times are still great. I agree. I agree. There's no doubt. I mean, look, they're going to miss on kids, right, Ryan? It's just, I think some of the negativity that some people have is because they just haven't missed on really anybody now. So when it does happen and it's a big name guy like a Dante Moore, it's like, wow. It's like, that's all anybody talks about. But this success rate they've had in 23 and 24 so far has been really, really good.
Yep. It's okay to be excited. I'll keep saying it. It's okay.
Kirk Prather, Brian and Ryan, if CJ Carr was in the class, where would he rank compared to other quarterbacks in 2023? Best guess.
That's a good question. I am going to pull up the list so I can have a little bit better. Because again, like these things are imperfect, right? Because we're comparing guys that are going to be seniors to a kid that's going to be a junior. So there's a
Which
year
means
of
we're comparing
maturation.
junior film to sophomore film, all that type of stuff.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep. So
I think he's top 10, Ryan. I mean, I don't know specifically where. I think he'd be a top 10 quarterback for sure. And I think he'd be a top 100 recruit. I think I'm comfortable saying both of those right now.
He would definitely be a top 10 quarterback. There's no doubt. I'm trying to like see exactly. He'd definitely be a top. I would say he'd be a top 6 quarterback in this class.
Say maybe 6 to 8, maybe.
Yeah.
Again, I'd have Dante ahead of him. I'd have Malachi ahead of him. I've had Jaden Rashad ahead of him. I'd probably have Arch ahead of him right now. I'd probably have Eli Holstein ahead of him right now. You know my stance on Nico. And again, a lot of it's just we've seen a lot more of those guys. Those guys have an extra year of development on him, and so to me, that's good. That's because what do we talk? This is one of the best this is one of the deepest quarterback classes we've ever seen.
Right.
And for him to be in that group is really important.
Agree.
John A1 says, again, they said Harry Hiestand couldn't recruit. Coach took the MJ route and took it personally, and said I'll get 6 guys. I agree with the first part. I don't think they're going to get 6 guys right now, but he definitely. I honestly don't think Harry Hiestand cares enough about what anybody says about him to have taken it personally. I think it comes, and I think John's just having some fun with it. Ryan, what it comes down to, and Sean Kane had a similar comment. Can't wait to see Harry coach up these 23 O-line recruits. Wow. I really think when you've been around Harry Hiestand this spring and you listen to him talk and you talk to people, I think he's rejuvenated for 2 reasons. One, I think he loves the staff that he's a part of. And B, I think he just, you kind of get away from coaching for a couple of years. And I think he's excited to get back on the field and get back to coaching.
Yeah.
All right. Alan Watson with a super chat. Alan says, isn't it nice not to have to look at a kid's intangibles and say he will grow into a fit? These guys all fit and will push for early playing time. I mean, that's the goal, right?
Yeah. I think that's pretty much true every year, Alan, but I think especially with how Notre Dame has kind of widened their scope of how they're evaluating and finding players that are fits, it's nice to see that there are kids that are highly ranked players who do care about school. It's pretty interesting to see and care about tradition. And yeah, so I agree though. I mean, that's what you're always trying to find is good fits, obviously, but it's been pleasantly surprised with how many kids all of a sudden care about school that are top athletes. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, it is very nice.
I mean, we just talked about a Texas corner that runs a 10-3 and is a highly academic kid, that might go to Harvard.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. It is kind of funny though, Ryan, as you kind of look through the comments that are in this chat and some of the comments that are on the board and other things. It is kind of funny to kind of see some of how easy it is to get people off of they're just going to be 6 to 8 or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just like the BK PTSD is strong, man. Like it takes one miss and all of a sudden people are like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe it. So it is hilarious. One of the questions we had from Sean Kane was, so after all these confidence levels on recruits, what is your confidence level on Notre Dame finishing with a 1 to 3 class? I'm still pretty strong on that right now, to be honest with you. As I look at some of these schools, and because again, you got to remember some of these schools are kind of pushing more for the portal than they are for the same volume of high school kids. So I would say I'm still at a 7 right now, if not 8. For a top 1 to 3 class. I feel very good about it. Plus, there's a lot of things that are going to happen during the fall. I think some Notre Dame kids are going to – I actually think some Notre Dame kids are going to have to jump up the rankings. They're just going to be – there's just some kids who are woefully underranked right now. Mm-hmm. Like Christian Gray is going to get rightly ranked by On3, and that's going to jump his ranking up. So I think some of that stuff factors into this as well, in my opinion. And I think the other thing that helps too is you got to think about this. It's not just about Notre Dame getting somewhere. It's – does Georgia lose some kids to Texas because of Arch? Does Alabama lose a couple kids to Tennessee because of the money they're paying out, right? So some kids that maybe a year or two ago before NIL would have gone to Bama, would have gone to Ohio State, would have gone to Georgia, now are going to Miami or Ole Miss or Oregon or Texas or flipping Louisville just bought a kid from, a top 50 kid. Like, you know what I mean? So like that's the unknown with a lot of this too, is I don't think it's just like, well, here's what the points have been. In some years, Notre Dame's current ranking would have them, what I project their ranking to be would have them, second or third. In other years, I think the ranking that I project Notre Dame to have this year would have them second. In other years, it would have them fifth. A lot of it just depends on how do the rest of the classes fill out. That's really going to be the question. But if you just look at, I'm just looking at what I project Notre Dame's numbers to be in the 247 composite, and every single year I'm looking at, and that's without a couple upsets. Every year that I'm looking at, they're no lower than fourth on any of them. And that includes what I project their numbers to be without Dante. I mean, I'm still down here. I'm down to 2018 and still no lower than fourth. And it's been third as much as it's been fourth, in my opinion. So, 2017, still the same, no lower than fourth. Would have been third that year over Georgia, behind Ohio State and Bama. Down to 2016, would have been first actually in 2016. So, yeah, they're still in good shape. They're still in a good position. So, yeah, I'm still quite comfortable with that one.
Same. I would throw an 8 up there. I think 8's a good number for it.
Yeah. All right. We had that one. I'm just trying to get down to where we were. Charlie Weiss's last belt loop. I don't know if this is what was reported or not. I have not heard this. Charlie Weiss's last belt loop said that Tom Loy and Steve Wiltfong both said Notre Dame wouldn't take Monroe Freeling if Elijah Page commits. I don't know who's reporting that. I don't want to speak to Tom, because I have had people say that I've reported something to other reporters that I never said, right? We just had something like that happen on our board recently. So I don't want to speak against Tom and Steve because I don't know if they reported this or not. I do know one person has reported this to a degree. And I can assure you with literal 100% certainty that there is no way that Notre Dame had made a decision to not take Monroe Freeling if they got Elijah Page. There was never that decision. And everything that we were told before Elijah Page committed and after Elijah Page committed, that if they can get Monroe Freeling and Charles Jaggasol, yes, they would have to do some things to make it work, but they were going to make it work. So I don't know where that came from, but I'm just telling you, I have not had a single source. And I think you guys can look at my track record over the last year. I've been pretty spot on with when I have sourced intel and I stick to something, I'm pretty accurate. I'm just telling you, that was never said to me. And when I brought it up, that was pushed back on strongly. And there was a very strong reaction from my sources when somebody did report that Notre Dame didn't like Monroe Freeling. And so I just I don't know where that's coming from. And that doesn't sound like something that Tom would say. It just, to me, it just doesn't. If he did, I'm sure someone told him that. Tom's not going to make something up and lie about something. I've never known Tom to do that. And so somebody told him that. I just think whoever told him that is wrong, or maybe there was a misinterpretation or something, but it just doesn't sound like something Tom would say. I could be wrong. I don't follow Tom. I don't read their stuff, but I know Tom, and that would surprise me a little bit, to be honest with you, if that was said. Yep. Floyd Genovese says Christian Hamilton is committing on Saturday. Is Notre Dame out of this one?
Yes.
They canceled
the visit.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
They pulled themselves out. Mm-hmm. Fat Fish with a super chat. Thank you for that very, very much. He says, was watching Caleb Downs highlights and wondered if Kyle Hamilton has reached out at all, and if that helps at all. A high recruit from Georgia, first round.
I mean, every safety that I've talked to, including like Peyton Bowen that's in the class, always talks about Kyle Hamilton, right? And it's like, that impact. And I think it's also nice the fact that Notre Dame also has Brandon Joseph now on the team. That's like, because you want to try to see yourself in a role, right? And Kyle Hamilton was kind of a very different player. So, I mean, it's tough, I think, for Caleb Downs to look at Kyle Hamilton and say like, I could be that because that guy's 6'4", 220. It's just a different football player. But Brandon Joseph is a lot more stylistically similar to like a Caleb Downs, for instance. So I think it helps for sure. I think there's some impact. I don't know if Kyle's reached out at all. Like, I have no idea, any insight into that information. All I'll say is that having a string of good safety play is definitely going to help your cause. Like, there's no doubt about that. Like, Brian, you mentioned about, for the simple fact of if Caleb Downs watches, good football, that it could help him, this fall. If Notre Dame's playing good football, that could impact him in a way. And I think one of the biggest things is, like, if he watches and he says, wow, Brandon Joseph's a baller, man. Like, that dude is a legit All-American. I could see myself there. That could be a huge impact, obviously, in that regard.
Yeah. All right. Jason Saxon says, Brian, after the July 4th of commitment of Christian Gray, wherever he goes, I'm adding that clarification. Do you see it slowing down, or could we see more commitments in July? It'll slow down, Ryan, big time from 5 and 6 days, right? That's slowing down, but I don't see them being done in July after July 4th.
Yeah, agree.
Tommy Gunn, go ahead.
Did we put what the number is on July? Is that what he's asking?
I don't know. I just think he's asking general could we see more commitments?
Yes, we could see more. I agree.
Tommy Guns, B. Ryan, fact or fiction? Notre Dame will be finished with the 2023 class by kickoff on September 3rd, other than in Pemba and maybe Greathouse. Fiction. Because I think if there are misses at certain positions, they're going to get involved in other kids. And I think they're always going to be looked to flip some big-time kids. Look, again, just because they lose on a kid that they want now doesn't mean – like, let's just say hypothetically that Jason Moore decides to commit to Penn State or Ohio State. Let's say Caleb Downs commits to Alabama or Ohio State, right? Do you really think Notre Dame's going to stop recruiting those kids? So, no, they're not done, right? And, Tommy, that's not a pushback. I'm just saying, like, I'm just answering the question and trying to ask rhetorical questions of they're going to keep recruiting those big-time players they want, and that's the reality of it. Brandon Plesner, is there any plan for 2023 quarterback recruiting besides possible reclassification? It's going to be hard for Notre Dame to flip a quarterback when they won't allow official visits from players committed elsewhere.
On the recent, Brandon, if I could take a stab at this, in my recent mailbag, I believe it was the first section of it, there was a question about who are some potential, options at quarterback if Dante Moore is not in the class. I put a few on there. I think 2 of them are currently uncommitted and then 3 are committed. So I kind of did a mixture of some guys to keep an eye on that are still on the market, quote unquote, and some guys that are still flippable type of options. It got a little tough to find guys that aren't committed right now because the board is kind of starting to fill itself out, right? Like, a lot of quarterbacks are now off the board. So there's a little mixture, though. If you want a couple names, I mean, I had guys like Avery Johnson, who's set to make his decision in July. I had Brock Glenn, who's an interesting player out of the state of Tennessee, a quarterback, and there's a couple familiar names on that list as well.
Kenny Minchie's a guy that I really like that would be on my list of guys I'd go after. I'd go after Ricky Collins, although he's been pretty adamant about staying committed to Purdue. Look, the reality is right now their 2023 focus has been on Dante Moore and potentially CJ Carr reclassifying. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. But, I mean, I think that's where their focus is. However, you made a distinction here. Notre Dame will not allow a kid to take an official visit if he's committed somewhere. It doesn't mean that they won't bring a kid on campus. They have brought committed kids on campus on unofficial visits. So, and also, let's be honest, there are some kids that Notre Dame could call tomorrow and say, hey, we'd like to take an official visit in the fall. Hey, but you got to decommit. And they'd say, okay, say when. I mean, that's the reality too, right? Now, would they want to take one of those kids? That's a different conversation. But there are certainly kids that they could get. If they want a 23 quarterback, they will get a 23 quarterback. It just may not be a big-time 23 quarterback, which I don't think that it will be. Last question. Actually, that's the last question. So we're going to wrap things up with that and get up on out of here. So I'm actually at 4:15. I'm going to be going on with Mark Rogers, the USC channel today. We're going to be talking a little bit about Notre Dame and USC and those type of things. So if you want to tune in, then definitely check that out. Otherwise, make sure you're locked into irishbreakdown.com for all the latest. Hit that like button, everybody. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that notification bell. Share this podcast. And, of course, if you're listening via podcast, give us a 5-star review. So for Ryan, I'm Brian. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you again very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.